Hello and welcome to the Shakedown. My name is Ryan Forbes, aka Rainforest, and I am here with Malone, who is here today to join us to talk about.
To say the least.
To say what?
To say the least, who is here today.
Who is here today, yes. Who is here today, and today we're going to talk about life before PREA. And for those of you who don't know about PREA is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. It is a federal act that was enacted in across prisons across the country. And Malone and I were just having a debate about who enacted what and when. So I'm actually going to look it up right now. And it was the Prison Rape Elimination Act of 2003. So I was right. It was a G.W. Bush act. And it was a United States.
What year did it? Wait a minute. What year did you say it was? 2003?
2003. And when did you say you
That's
saw?
When it was enacted.
That was when it was enacted. So when did you see the first PREA posters put up in?
I was the unit artist at the time. And so the very first ones were, we're talking like maybe 2014 or so. It was the first time that anybody, it's hard for me to say exactly. The years kind of blend together, but it was in that period of time.
In what period of time? 2003?
Like around 2014, around 2014. So
2014.
It was well over a decade after that was signed into law that they ever enacted a single policy of PREA in Texas prisons.
And I remember I was at Gurney in 2015, and they were only just starting to put up the curtains in the showers so that officers and inmates would not for those of you who don't know about Gurney, the way it was set up in Gurney is that these showers there were no doors or curtains or anything on the shower, so that when you took a shower, people could just look in and just watch you shower. You were just showering in front of everyone. And not only that, the TVs were right above the showers. So people were like, all they had to do was glance down from the TV and see you buck naked.
Were the toilets in the same type of arrangement?
Yes, they were. They were in the same type of arrangement. But there was a wall that was kind of blocking the toilets. So it wasn't as easy to look into the toilets. But they were, still people could. It wasn't that hard to look into the toilets and to see who was in there and to see it set up. And Gurney wasn't the only unit that was set up that way. Pretty much any transfer facility was set up that way so that people could look into the showers.
Most of those units of that era were the type of like Gurney. They were all set up like that, where the toilets were the toilets and the showers were put where the televisions were, and I have to believe that was on purpose.
Yeah, I feel that way too.
It wasn't ever changed. Still hasn't been changed. All they did was they put a wall up, or some places had the wall, some places didn't have the wall, some places the toilets were wide open. If you had to do your business, you were going to have to do it with an audience.
Right. Yeah, they did. Some places built like temporary walls, like used PVC pipe and with a curtain wrapped around it, and they used that as the walls for the toilets. I have seen that. And then they just use like plastic curtains that were like jankily held up, like someone like drilled a screw onto either side of the showers, and then a curtain was held across the screws, and you'd have to unpin one side to get in and out of the shower.
I am interested to know though. What else you're seeing there? Is there any kind of reasoning that was given behind the Prison Rape Elimination Act or anything? Is there?
Any reasoning? Well, um, the purpose of the act is to provide the analysis of the incidents and effects of prison rape in federal, state, and local institutions, and to provide information, resources, recommendations, and funding to protect individuals from prison rape. Yeah, and that is the main purpose.
That's the official.
That is the official reasoning.
Statement for the reason why they're doing why they did all that.
Right. That is.
Did you ever hear like inmates sitting around complaining about all this PREA stuff? Complaining that they felt like it was inconvenient. Oh, I don't care if they see me naked, that type of thing.
We had an episode with Dave, and he actually talked about how sometimes it made it like it was. People talk about how the good old days before PREA, and how it made things easier before PREA. And how with all these inmates snitching on each other and stuff like that. So, yes, I heard that quite a bit for sure.
I always thought that was interesting. The thing that I thought was the most fascinating aspect of PREA, whenever TDC actually finally started taking it seriously, is that they couldn't just command you to get naked at a moment's notice anymore. I mean, prior to PREA, one of the things that I always thought was one of the most dehumanizing and just unbelievable aspects of prison life was how you're constantly walking. I mean, you walk down the hallways. There's butt naked men walking up and down the hallways constantly in in full view of everyone. You're constantly being told, get out of them. That was just a common thing. Hey, stop what you're doing right now. Take off your clothes. Make you do a little dance, spin around so they can see a 360 view of your naked body and all that while you're. And it was all the time. I mean, you could several times a day have to. Go through that, and it just was had become such a part of the daily routine. I don't think anybody ever thought about it. And so whenever they changed it, people actually complained because they're so used to life like that in there that they complained about having their own humanity respected again.
Yeah, it is really weird to hear what people complained about. Like I found it weird too that people would complain about how
we mentioned in the last episode that we did, we talked about we just mentioned the Hurricane Harvey evacuation.
Right.
And that we were gone, the Jewish community was gone for 6 months before it came back to the Stringfellow unit, which was its home unit where they had the kosher kitchen and so forth. The reason why we were gone for 6 months is not because the unit was underwater for 6 months. The unit was only underwater for 3 weeks. We could have gone back in 3 weeks. But because they shipped us to the PAC unit, which was currently under a lawsuit for air conditioning, was under the air conditioning lawsuit. So then everybody that was on the unit then fell under the air conditioning ruling that if you had any kind of heat restriction whatsoever on your medical situation, well, then they had to house you in a unit that had air conditioning. Now, you would think, living in Southeast Texas without air conditioning, as torturous as that is, that any inmate that would then get from that point forward be housed in air conditioning would rejoice at the idea that they're getting air conditioning. And instead, it was the exact opposite. I can't say it was the majority, but it certainly was the vocal majority that were the majority of people that you heard complaining about it were, and most of them didn't even. I mean, they didn't care about the air conditioning, and they weren't so concerned about getting back to the other unit. They had some kind of peripheral concern, like, oh, I don't want someone else packing my craft shop stuff, so I need to get back over there. So I'm going to jump on this air conditioning thing and tell them I don't want air conditioning. So you had people signing petitions saying they didn't want air conditioning. Please send me back to my old unit where they can burn me up in an oven And I got in quite a bit of trouble with the guys because I refused to sign it. They said that they had to have a complete a unanimous, not one person could not sign it type of thing, and then the rest of them go. So they were all mad at me because I'm like, man, I'm not signing over my right to air conditioning. If they're going to air condition me, then I'm going to keep it. But they had none of those guys had been locked up. Well, I can't say none of them because some of them had. Some of the ones that had been locked up the longest were the worst ones, were the biggest complainers about it. That is a strange fact of prison life that some people, the most onerous conditions that you mentioned to some people, like the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which doesn't seem at all unreasonable to me that you wouldn't, that they wouldn't be able to command you to get butt naked in a moment's notice. For some reason, they're complaining about it and they want to get butt naked again. They want to be able to walk around without their clothes on or something. And
but that's not that wasn't the thing that got them though.
Huh?
But the buck naked part was never the thing that got brought up though. Was with PREA, not that I ever heard people complain about.
There would be like an inconvenience issue, like, oh, I want to do this and get done with it type of thing. So let's just go ahead and everybody get their clothes on. No, well, we can't all go ahead and get our clothes off in the hallway anymore. And then somebody else is going to complain about that because maybe it inconvenienced them or something. I mean, you're right. There was an extenuating circumstance to most of it, but still, I just find it difficult to believe that anybody would complain about that.
Well,
but yet they did.
Yeah, there was a thing. So, like one part is that it didn't stop. I remember like I said, at Gurney, there was this guy who it was an officer who had been off for a while, and then he came back. And the first thing he did was he started to randomly stripping inmates on the way to breakfast. Actually, on the way back, on the way to and on the way back from breakfast. I mean, like I watched it, I'm like, who are you? And like, it seemed, not only did it seem like offensive, it seemed like straight up sexual harassment. Is like, he's like, oh, I want to see you naked. Oh, I want to see you naked. It was seemed very predatory. That's still, there's still
You're
that?
right. It did not altogether stop anywhere. I mean, there's isolated incidences after that where somebody didn't take it seriously and had to be put in their place.
Yeah.
But as with any law or right or anything, the only way you're going to get it in people to take it seriously is by filing fighting for it, basically.
Right. And but like, I get that. The thing that I always heard inmates
dealing with a rank on the unit. I mean, do you remember the whole case that happened on the Stringfellow unit long before you got there with the major, where the inmate goes into the office and tells the major, "I'm being raped. Your guard is pulling me out at night and raping me. I have the proof right here. I've got a pair of dirty underwear with this guy's DNA in it." And the woman major at the time just told him to get out of her office and just blew it off like it was completely nothing. And then later on, of course, he smuggled those dirty underwear off the unit, and it turns out that he wasn't lying, that the officers the physical evidence was certainly on the underwear, and the guy ended up getting fired, and she ended up getting fired. It wasn't until it got brought to light, but while it was on the unit, they weren't going to do anything about it. If this guy hadn't have broke the law by smuggling a pair of underwear off the unit somehow, he would have never gotten any attention at all. He would have still been getting raped.
No, that's happened a bunch of different times.
Yeah.
Those reporters, I've said it before, reporters are notorious for I don't know if they bring them in, but they definitely encourage inmates to use cell phones, which inmates getting caught with a cell phone is a free world charge. But at the same time, if the inmates didn't use the cell phone, they wouldn't have the stories that the reporters could post saying look at the conditions of the food, look at the conditions of this, look at the conditions of that. Because the reporters can't get photos inside of prisons unless it's from an inmate.
Get access to that. Right.
So
They don't allow media onto prison units, and they don't give you access. And even the units that do have cameras, like the Ramsey unit, they don't give access to those. To the media, which I think is ridiculous. I think that should be a part of like the Freedom of Information Act.
right, and then I'm pretty sure like the ACA, the one that the board that's supposed to there. So there's Texas state prisons, and there's the ACA, which is the board that's supposed to like rate and guide the conditions of Texas state prisons. I'm pretty sure is run by the state of Texas. So it's yeah.
The ACA is run by the state of Texas.
I'm
I think, if I remember correctly, when I was the unit artist, and we suddenly one morning woke up and got the order, we're about to have to start putting these PREA signs everywhere, and this major had gone out and gotten us a couple of spray cans of bright orange paint, and had a pre-made stencil that he got from somewhere for that PREA, that the crazy kind of upbeat lettering that they had for all those PREA signs everywhere. Do you remember that?
I remember. Yeah. I don't know about upbeat, but I do remember all those. You can see PREA everywhere.
You ought to see if you can find an example of that sign somewhere, because they use that same kind of lettering to show the people whenever we're talking about this, so they know what I'm talking about. But he had a pre-made stencil, and he showed up, and all of a sudden we had to put these things everywhere. And he had lots of other signs that he had ideas, all of them regarding PREA. And it had something to do with ACA, because that major hit the unit, and they gave him, it was his charge to get this unit into compliance with ACA. And it was badly out of compliance. And so there was a whole lot of work that needed to be done. And as they always do, first thing that they do is just like anybody is trying to trick you into buying a house, they just throw a coat of paint over it. So we did the majority of the work fell on the backs of the unit artists / paint crew.
Yeah, well, that was the biggest thing for ACA. Like I remember, at Stringfellow, one of the last ACA things. Actually, when I was at Dalhart, I remember the office manager for maintenance who I worked for. I had heard the main thing that got her job was that she could get paint. Like she was able to finagle the finances and get paint from all these other units, which is really important when it comes to ACA, because there'd be all these ACA times that ACA would come to the unit. And whenever the units knew that ACA was coming, they'd basically repaint the entire unit. And for Stringfellow,
that's exactly what the first thing they do.
Yeah, and which was for Stringfellow was extremely important.
Straight up told us. They said, you remember how when you hit the front door, on the floor is that giant state seal?
Right.
And then there's that large desk with that big wooden cutout of the seal of Texas and all that. There's flags up there, and there's other pictures on the wall. They told us straight up that that's what they wanted. They wanted anybody that walked onto the unit, whenever they walked on, to have their eyes attracted to this big state seal on the floor and this fancy paint job that's right in front of them and all that, and not see the rest of it. They wanted them to do it. Was like a sort of a smoke and mirrors type of tactic to keep them from seeing the real problems. The water pouring down from the ceiling every time it rains and stuff like that.
And the fact that it was, 115 degrees inside the unit at any given time.
Yeah.
But the
guards passing out on a regular basis from the heat.
Right. And and the other thing was like at the trustee camp, which I know you didn't see, but like the big importance of paint at the trustee camp was it flooded, as we've said. Hurricane Harvey hit and the unit flooded. And at the trustee camp, it was especially bad because there was black mold that had built up in the buildings at the trustee camp, and there was nothing they could.
Was black mold. You know better than that. There's black mold all over the inside of the unit too.
Right, and but the only thing they could do, the only thing they could do about it was to paint over it. That's all they could do.
Yeah, and that did nothing.
No, because by the time they'd painted so far in advance to get ready for ACA, that by the time ACA showed up, the black mold had peeled through the paint. So
We had gone. We actually had one of the guys in our right before Harvey hit. One of the guys that was in our group had gone to the warden. He was a specialist in black mold out here in the world, and he used to get rid of black mold for like big hotel chains and things like that. So he had gone to the warden and explained to him, this is black mold, what you're dealing with here. This is not just some kind of, this is not a stain or something else. This is black mold. And they're like, it's okay. And the wardens were told him, it's okay. You know, it's all right. Well, we got plenty of bleach. We'll bleach that out and scrub it. And he explained to him, you cannot bleach black mold away. That's not how black mold works. He gave them the whole entire science of it, how it's a spore and how the spore closes itself and can seal itself off against things like bleach and so forth, and will survive. It's an extremely durable form of plant life, I guess. And yeah, I mean, it only responds to certain levels of heat and so forth else. You have to be able to heat it. And he gave them every last bit of that information, and they just ignored it. They decided against actually dealing with it. And like you said, they'll just throw a coat of paint over it. Of course, those ignorant morons probably thought that the paint was going to be enough to cover it or something, or probably still thought the bleach would kill it. You know, they deny science regularly.
yeah, that is definitely a common thing, and they don't want to hear it. And it was,
That's just too inconvenient, costs too much money. Well, you're just going to have to, wait till somebody files a lawsuit on it, and then we'll deal with it.
you don't want to have your life. That was the thing I dealt with on a regular basis. I would see lots of things where, I knew I was like putting my life at risk, and they just didn't. They're like, just bleach it or paint over it or whatever. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And I was like, great. Well, that's just I just have to live here. And so did you for a much longer time. And it's just horrifying to think about, and the fact that it's still going on for a while. But we didn't get to talk too much about the days before PREA. Do you have any final points before we wrap this up?
Days before PREA, one of the things that illustrates just how insane the days before PREA were, in my opinion. One of the stories that stands out in my mind the most is one of those days I was coming in from the fields on beat 01. And for some reason or another, the guards stopped the wagons a good ways away from where you actually enter into the unit. They stopped the wagons and they had us all get off the wagons, and then they had us all get out of our clothes, butt naked. And we had to walk with our tools and our clothes in our hands, ass naked, all the way up to the back gate where we were then going to be searched and then let into the unit. Now, I'm assuming that they probably told us to get out of our clothes then as some kind of convenience for them. But a lot of these guys were, they had lawnmowers and other kinds of tools, weed eaters and all that. And I remember looking over and seeing these butt naked guys pushing lawnmowers. And it just hit me just how absolutely insane this whole situation is. We are standing outside with all these guards around us on towers and everything else with guns over us. And we're walking butt naked with lawnmowers, pushing lawnmowers to get to the back dock. I can remember there was a case of a guy it was a DNA exoneration. This man had done over a decade in prison, probably like something like, I think it was around 11 years or so in prison before he was exonerated by DNA. He was let out of prison. Well, whenever he got out of prison, it wasn't very long after he got out of prison that he lived out here in the Houston area. Quan LX was involved in his case because he was, trying to help this guy out. He was he was caught in a department store masturbating in public in this department store. He's like hiding behind a rack or something, masturbating, looking at some fully clothed woman off in the distance. the old way of before PREA sort of rewarded these weirdos that it created this culture of like masturbating in public and all this other stuff because people's nakedness wasn't guarded. So people had no problem with just whipping it out. Riots have happened in TDC because of inmates, this public masturbation thing that inmates had in their head. And it was, I mean, when I say it's a culture, I mean, it's literally this thing that was so prevalent that it was for the majority of the time that I was in prison. I mean, it was, there was only no guard. The guards couldn't stop it no matter. Now, the disciplinary cases or nothing, it was just so over everywhere. And so eventually, other inmates, I mean, people had to band together to physically fight, to force people to stop masturbating around you, which is a sickness. But it was brought on by this culture that made the pre-PREA mindset that made that type of thing all right. I felt really sorry for that guy. I remember when I heard that case because I thought, man, that dude his brain has been warped by what happened to him in prison. That's the only reason he was doing that. And he wasn't in his right mind. His decade or more in prison had warped his thinking and the way he viewed sexuality altogether. And that's ultimately in my mind what the real benefit of finally adhering to the PREA rules and laws is that it has certainly blunted and probably will eventually wipe out that extremely deviant sexual thinking that was going on before that.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap it up. If anyone has any comments or questions, please let us know, and we love hearing from you. And we look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you.
What a pleasant episode this has been, Rainforest. I'm sure everyone is going to just want to go out and get themselves an ice cream or something after this.
Absolutely.
And enjoy a pleasant day in the park or something.
We hope you do. All right, bye. The Shakedown was produced at Longmont Public Media. And our theme song, Shakedown, was brought to you by Envato Elements. If you want any Shakedown merchandise, or you want to support the show, you can go to waywordpress.com. That's WAYWORD press.com.